Haseki Hurrem Sultan became the woman who broke many of the usual traditions of the Ottoman Empire. This woman succeeded in what others could not dream of. Having fallen in love with her lord and master, Suleiman the Magnificent, Hurrem was able to gain almost unlimited power and authority. She was the first woman of the harem to bear more than one son to the lord. If earlier all women adhered to the tradition of one concubine, one son, then Hurrem decided to maximize her position and gave birth to the Sultan 5 sons and 1 daughter. One of the Shahzad did not live to maturity, having died in infancy. But the others grew up and matured. Probably, this state of affairs was the reason that between the siblings there was an acute tension that eventually turned into a bloody feud. But here we mean only Selim and Bayezid, the second and third sons of Hurrem and Suleiman. The eldest son, Mehmed, grew up to be a very decent and well-mannered young man. It was him, bypassing the eldest son Mahidevran Sultan, wanted to see on the throne of Hurrem and Suleiman. He was everyone's favorite. But Mehmed's premature death was the turning point from which the struggle between the other brothers began. Such situations had not arisen in the empire before, as the sons of the sultans were not related to each other, but only half-brothers. And although they were close relatives, it did not prevent them from eliminating their rivals in the struggle for the throne in all possible ways. And if one of them achieved the goal of becoming the next ruler, the fate of the surviving brothers was unenviable. Even Mehmed the Conqueror was of the opinion that for the sake of preserving the empire can and should go to the extreme measures, namely get rid of all male relatives of any age, so that none of them could not encroach on the power of the Sultan. So this bloody custom existed for many centuries, and the sultans were not afraid to resort to it again and again. Except, of course, when the heir was the only candidate for the throne. So, the very fact that the sultan had several sons by one woman could be a reason to revise the long-standing traditions and abandon fratricidal wars. But parental education should have played an important role in this case. And that was not the case. Giving birth to so many sons was just a way for Hurrem to bind the sultan to her and get more privileges. She only loved Mehmed, her firstborn son. When he died, she had to turn her attention to her other sons, but by then they were adults. That is, they grew up, matured, became men, but without the participation of both parents in their lives. The sultan gave all his time to managing the state and expanding its borders. Hurrem devoted her time to intrigue, trying to get rid of people who threatened her position. So the upbringing of children was done by trusted people and officials. And this was not conducive to brotherly love. Therefore, instead of kinship affection between siblings, there was a sense of constant rivalry. A small difference in age, as well as completely different characters, only aggravated the situation. When Hurrem saw how serious this rivalry had become, she tried to influence her sons in some way, to press them with the power of her authority, but it was too late. Something to change, to instill brotherly love for each other, all this had to be done in childhood. And when the Shahzad went to their sanjaks, the distance between them became even greater, and not only territorially. Suleiman, seeing all this, specially sent Selim and Bayezid in different directions from Istanbul. But even here the Shahzad suspected intent. Selim, as more calm and judicious, was sent to the province, which was much closer to the capital than the sanjak of Bayezid. This state of affairs did not please the third son at all. It automatically reduced his chances of being the first to get to Istanbul in case of his father's death. In addition, incited by his cronies and mentor, Bayezid, characterized by an extremely fiery and hot temper, had a tendency to commit rash acts. Proud and fair by nature, he was very much like his father and believed that Selim was unworthy to take the throne of the Sultan. Therefore, the rivalry with his brother gradually turned into a struggle for justice. Selim had a very mediocre character, more amenable to the influence of others and indulging in all his low habits. In addition, the second son was not very fond of wars and campaigns, preferring the comfort and coziness of the palace to the hardships of military campaigns. Such behavior, in Bayezid's opinion, only disgraced the Ottoman dynasty. Perhaps if Hurrem and Suleiman had spent more time with their children, the conflict could have been avoided. But judging by their behavior, on the contrary, it seems as if they were deliberately pushing their sons to confrontation. For example, Sultan Suleiman preferred to take Selim with him on military campaigns rather than Bayezid. He was guided by the fact that war would help Selim develop the necessary skills and qualities of a leader. And he left Bayezid to manage the state at this time to develop his diligence and prudence. Both Shahzads hated this state of affairs. Selim hated wars, preferring the capital. And Bayezid was eager to go to war, while his father never took him with him. Such illogical behavior of the wisest and most enlightened sultan seems rather strange. And instead of reminding them of brotherly feelings and that they are one family, where everyone should support each other, Hurrem emphasizes that the eldest is always right, without explaining why. And it is quite natural that the sons, feeling resentment for their parents' unfair decisions, took their irritation out on each other. Which years later resulted in a bloody confrontation, where the brave and hot-tempered Bayezid lost to his more cunning and cautious brother. The support of his parents played no small part in the outcome of this struggle. By preferring the more inert and controlled Selim to the unbridled Bayezid, Hurrem and Suleiman only accelerated the long-standing feud between the siblings. Although in the opinion of the people and the Janissaries, Bayezid was much more suited to the role of ruler than his brother,